Good Friday morning. Um, my name is Tim, and we are going to be talking today about ladybugs. And before we started today, I asked the people that are joining us live what they call the ladybug, and there seemed to be some confusion because, yeah, it's a ladybug. This is the Backyard Naturalist series, and I'm excited to tell some stories on behalf of probably one of the most recognizable insects around. Probably only, maybe one of a handful of insects that just about everyone watching this has seen and can identify. And I'm going to start out calling it the ladybug because that's the name that I called it as a kid. But before we talk ladybugs, I'd like to give my weekly shout out to the parent site for the Backyard Naturalist series, the UEC in My Backyard. Since my last talk a few weeks ago, there's been some fabulous added content, including a sway by veteran educator Aaron Whitney on a unique way to produce autumn art with leaves. And if you don't know what a sway is, go to the website, click on the program called Autumn Art in the Kids section. Sways are these really cool avenues for displaying information in a multimedia format, like a story map. There are also entries on other seasonal eco-friendly crafts for adults and kids. There's a virtual botany talk on inflorescences, where land steward Jeff Vagelin compares the seed head structure of the common native grasses in Three Bridges Park, and it's a nice little botany refresher for those of you that are interested in that. There's some Thanksgiving recipes. It's never too late for those. There's a new 5 Facts with Danny on a Backyard Naturalist alum, the Virginia opossum. And maybe my favorite new entry is by community programs educator Van Johnson, who posts 9 songs and the videos for the songs that are earth or climate inspired. And they range from Earth Song by Michael Jackson to I Need to Wake Up by Melissa Etheridge. So I encourage you to visit the UEC in My Backyard and check back every few days for new content. And also just a reminder to consider subscribing to the new Urban Ecology Center podcast, which produces a new episode every other week. And also a heartfelt thank you to the subscribers for this series. Your support is immeasurable to me and to the Urban Ecology Center. And to all of you watching now, I'm glad you're here. Okay, let's get to today's main feature, the ladybug. They're cute, the shape of a button. Some consider them lucky. People that fear other bugs often have no problems picking up a ladybug and letting its little feet tickle their fingers or their nose. So what exactly is a ladybug? We'll start with something familiar. They are a type of beetle. We had one other beetle featured in season 1, the firefly. So if you're interested in learning more about beetles, you can revisit that episode. But beetles belong to the insect order Coleoptera, which means sheathed wing, because in beetles, the forewings evolved to become a hard, leathery sheath, protecting both the body and the more delicate flying wings, which are tucked underneath. And we'll take a closer look at that a little bit later. And also why I think this structure is one of the reasons we seem to be okay with ladybugs or lightning bugs, where we tend to look at other bugs as icky. Ladybugs are further grouped into the family Coccinellidae. And if you grew up in the United States, you likely call these insects ladybugs. If you grew up in Britain or another part of the Commonwealth, you likely call them lady beetles. And if you talk to an entomologist, you will be corrected, as I was in college, that their true names are ladybird beetles, or they'll defend the Brits just by calling them lady beetles. The idea behind this distinction is that they're not technically bugs. So the argument is that they shouldn't be called ladybugs, which prompts me to insert my opinion. If there's ever any doubt about the word bug, here's how to set people straight. First of all, anything that is small and squishy, go ahead and call it a bug. That's the vernacular that many of us are used to. It's an umbrella term. You are not wrong. Also, there is a group of insects that are called the true bugs, the Hemiptera. Hemi meaning half and ptera meaning wing, alluding to the characteristic that half of their forewings are hardened, which often results in an X pattern on the back because of the way the wings are folded. So X often marks the Hemiptera. There's some recognizable Hemipteras, like the stink bug on the left, that I bet some of you have found in your houses, and the froghopper on the bottom, which is the adult form of the spittlebug we featured in season 1. And this order of insects are what scientists call the true bugs. But I say go ahead and call anything small and squishy a bug. And if anyone corrects you, send them to me. So ladybugs is perfectly fine. And ladybugs or lady beetles make up the beetle family Coccinellidae, as I mentioned earlier, which has a Latin root meaning scarlet, an apt description for the color of some ladybugs. The name ladybird originates from Britain, where they called them Our Lady's Bird, or the lady beetle, after the Virgin Mary, the mother of Jesus, who was often depicted in a red cloak, and the 7 spots on the most common British ladybug symbolize the 7 joys and sorrows of the Virgin Mary. In fact, the German name for this insect is Marienkaffer, or Mary beetle. So like the cardinal or the prothonotary warbler, the roots of the word ladybug in English has a religious connotation associated with one of the most famous Christian figures. There are surprisingly over 6,000 species of ladybugs. Most of them share that similar body and color plan with the dome-shaped back, the tiny legs. None of the members of this family reach more than about a ½ inch in size, but there is quite a bit of variation among the ladybugs, as you can see here. But they all share the characteristic of being pretty darn cute. Cute as a button, in fact, which led me to look at where does the phrase cute as a button come from. I always assumed it meant the button on your shirt, but in my opinion, that's really cute, and ladybugs are cute, so I thought maybe, but I looked it up, and apparently the button in the phrase cute as a button comes from the flower of the bachelor's button. So if you were ever wondering which buttons were so cute that they would name a phrase after them, wonder no more. Cute as a button. There are also some ladybug lookalikes that borrowed this body plan, but aren't ladybugs. The tortoise beetle, like the one on the lower left, that group is so named because they can stick to the surface and pull their soft body parts underneath like a suction cup so that predators just can't get to them, much like how a turtle pulls itself into a shell. And that defensive behavior kind of lend itself really well to the ladybug body plan. The grapevine beetle on the right looks like a ladybug, but is actually a type of scarab beetle. But none of the beetles pictured here are lady beetles. And it's not only other beetles that mimic ladybugs. Here is another mimic, and I'll let you look closely at this picture for a moment to see if you can guess what it is. The hint is it's not a beetle, and it's not even an insect. This is a spider, the ladybird mimic spider. And there's another type of ladybird mimic spider that takes a different approach to that mimicry. This one is just called the ladybird spider. So here we have the ladybird spider on the left and the ladybird mimic spider on the top and right. And we'll get this question out of the way right away. Some of you may have heard that the number of spots on a ladybug's back indicates its age, and the answer is mostly false. The number of spots don't increase with age, they don't change, but the darkness of those spots can increase with age. And in fact, some species, you don't even see the spots for the first few days of its adult life, but they get darker as the individuals get older. So here is a freshly emerged Harmonia axiritis. And here is what the species would look like a few days later. The number of spots on all ladybug species ranges from 0 to a lot. And learning the names of ladybug species can be pretty difficult. So I'll give you a quick primer. You can get your pencils and paper out. So we'll start with this one. This is the 2-spotted lady beetle. Then we have the 4-spotted lady beetle, the 5-spotted lady beetle, the 6-spotted zigzag lady beetle, the 7-spotted lady beetle. I hope this isn't getting too confusing. The 8-spotted lady beetle, the 9-spotted lady beetle, the 10-spotted lady beetle, and this next one I always have trouble with. It's the 11-spotted lady beetle. We have the 12-spotted lady beetle and the 13-spotted lady beetle and the 14-spotted lady beetle. I can do this all day. There's a 15-spotted lady beetle, the 16-spotted lady beetle, the 18-spotted lady beetle, the 20-spotted lady beetle, the 22-spotted lady beetle, the 24-spotted lady beetle, the 26-spotted lady beetle, the 28-spotted lady beetle, and that ends our Ladybird ID primer. So 28 spots. If you ever come across a trivia question that says name 20 species of beetles, you are golden. Ladybugs for a long time were thought to be strictly carnivorous, but recent studies have shown that they have a pretty broad omnivorous diet, eating plants and mushrooms, But many of them are predators of aphids, like this yellow-shouldered ladybird. And why is that important to us? Because many aphids are agricultural pests. So with the exception of a few ladybirds that are pests themselves, ladybugs tend to be friends of the farmer as a method of pest control. Ladybugs also prey on pests like mites and moths, including the European corn borer moth, which costs the US agriculture industry more than $1 billion annually in crop losses and population control. And the ladybug photo on the right was forwarded to me by Jenny. In case you can't see it, it has the subtitle, num num num. So ladybirds are voracious eaters, ferocious and ferocious. Ladybugs like to eat, and there are things that like to eat ladybugs. Some, like birds and wasps and frogs and spiders and dragonflies, can be pretty good at eating ladybugs, but they do have a few tricks up their sleeves to prevent themselves from becoming prey. So first is that hard outer shell, that protective shell. Second, they can be noxious to predators and are brightly colored, a phenomenon known as aposematism, where many predators soon learn that brightly colored animals should usually be ignored, either because they are poisonous or venomous. But your word of the day has to do with another form of ladybug defense, which is reflex bleeding or autohemorrhaging, where the defense is that they will bleed on you. And most life stages of ladybugs have that ability to perform this defense. So in the photo on the left, you have an adult lady beetle reflex bleeding with that hemolymph, likely after they were attacked or disturbed. So that is their own blood spilling out on purpose. And on the photo on the right, you have an adult lady beetle trying to feed on a prepupal lady beetle. And as a defense, the pupa is exuding its own blood, which is super noxious and sticky. So it deters the attack and may even gum up the chewing parts of the attacker like an ant for quite a while. When adult ladybugs reflex bleed, it usually comes out of its legs, but there's no hole, there's no orifice for the blood to come out. So they actually have to injure themselves and cause a tear in their skin, a trauma, so that the blood can come out. And in a single incident, it will lose 15 to 20% of its own blood, which is a lot, but the alternative is not being alive. So I guess in the long run, that is an effective adaptation. And ladybugs aren't the only animal to exhibit reflex bleeding. There's some horny lizards and snakes and other insects, like fireflies, use this as a defense mechanism as well. The snake on the left doesn't normally have red eyes, but when handled or attacked, its eyes fill with blood and then it spills out of its mouth. And with some horny lizards, if they're attacked by something like a coyote or a bobcat, they will actually shoot blood out of their eyes, and it can go several feet. And because it has a foul taste, it might shoot into the mouth of the predator, who then kind of freaks out and runs away. There was a pretty good podcast, one of the NPR science podcasts a few days ago, and the researcher studying this, and you really, if you're studying an animal, you really get into it. They actually tasted the blood to see if it tasted bad. And to the human tasting it, he said it didn't taste any different from his own blood. But apparently the coyotes and the foxes, as soon as they get that taste in their mouth, they really freak out, because humans aren't, we haven't evolved to be predators of these animals, so they're not as concerned with us. I'm going to show you a very short video of autohemorrhaging in snakes. So if the sight of blood affects you, or if you're easily grossed out, you may want to look away from your screen for a few minutes, but for the rest of you, this is pretty cool. So that's it. Well, don't look yet if you're still looking away, because the video is still running here. All right. Okay, so now if you are squeamish, you can look back to some. Okay, so on to another cool ladybird story. I would guess that most of us don't normally consider insects to be doting, loving parents, but every time I look into a new species of insect, I find exceptions to the rule. So I'm beginning to think that the exceptions are the rule, like the potato bug that carries its young in a pouch in its tummy for a long time. And in the case of the ladybug, there are a couple of nice motherly adaptations. First of all, if they are predators, which many of them are, of a certain type of bug, like an aphid, they will lay their eggs in the midst of that aphid colony or whatever it is they like to eat. So as soon as the young hatch, they're surrounded by good, yummy food. Secondly, if food is scarce, moms will lay extra non-fertilized eggs right next to the fertilized eggs as kind of a starter food to get the little ones going. And if the conditions are bad, they'll lay more of those eggs, called trophic eggs. If conditions are good, they'll lay fewer of them. And speaking of excellent mothers, it's my mom's birthday today. So happiest of birthdays to you, Mom. Next to a ladybug, I couldn't have asked for a better mom. And just like how I kind of crept back into my mother's house after college, you may have noticed that about a month or two ago, ladybird beetles started creeping their way into our houses. And this behavior is a result of the life cycle of ladybugs. So some insects in temperate climate, like ours here in Milwaukee, they'll overwinter as eggs. Some will overwinter as nymphs or larvae, but ladybugs overwinter as adults. And normally they congregate in south-facing areas of larger, darker objects that absorb the sun's rays, like trees, where they enter a sort of suspended animation for the winter, a state known as diapause. Their metabolism slows way down, and they kind of wait out the winter in these groups until spring, similar to hibernating, but not exactly. Starting as early as 1916, we brought a species known as the harlequin or Asian ladybird beetle to the US as a form of pest control, but populations never seemed to stick around despite repeated attempts over the following decades. However, in about 1979, a population in Louisiana really seemed to gain a foothold and spread. And by 1994, they worked their way into Wisconsin and fairly quickly became the most common ladybird beetle in the country, displacing many of our native species. It's one of the most variable insects we know of. These are all various forms of the same species, the Asian ladybird beetle. And it's also called the Halloween beetle because that's about the time that this invader tends to enter our houses. So for about the last 20 some years, if you've noticed this house invasion of the ladybugs, it's almost certainly this Asian ladybug that comes in these huge numbers. Every once in a while, the native bugs will maybe find their way into a windowsill, but not in the numbers that we find the Asian ladybugs. And if we kind of go back to the slide of the home invaders, you can see the many different varieties of color that this species takes, but it's all one species, and it's all the invasive Asian lady beetle trying to get into our houses. It's not really a terrible species to have around. They don't hurt people. We can be allergic to them. If you ate them in large numbers, you'd probably get sick, but they're still good for pest control. But the big problem is that they've displaced many of our native lady beetles. Here is a slide of the Asian beetle on the left and what used to be our most common lady beetle in Wisconsin and still is our most common native lady beetle, the convergent beetle, or Hippodamia convergens on the right. And even the native convergent beetle is still shipped around for pest control. You can order them and release them as pest control, but natural populations of these are becoming much harder to find as the Asian beetles continue to dominate. One of the easiest ways to identify the non-native beetle in its many forms has to do with the pattern on the head. So those two kind of white football-shaped false eyes on the head, and the letter M or W, depending on your angle, or if you're a Badgers fan or a Gophers fan. So what comes next after they crash in our houses for the winter? When the days become longer and the sun's rays become more direct, the lady beetles spread back out into the fields and the forests. They'll lay several batches of eggs over the late spring and early summer. In the case of the native convergent beetle, you're talking 200 to 300. And you can see here that this mom dutifully laid her eggs right in the middle of an aphid population. So as soon as they hatch as larvae, they're surrounded by food. And ladybug larvae are no joke. For an adult that's cute as a button, Their larvae are pretty scary alligator-looking creatures, and especially probably to those weary aphids that were nervously wondering what was going to hatch out of those eggs. And the larvae go through 4 instars and then enter the pupal stage, much like a caterpillar makes that final transition into a chrysalis. And then about a week later, with a little bit of magic fairy dust, an adult lady beetle emerges from the pupa. They mate soon after entering adulthood and can start laying some of those eggs right away, while hanging on to others for about 9 months to be laid the following spring. And here's a cool photo that Jenny sent me that shows a time lapse of the advance of those pupal stages in ladybugs. And we'll also see this in the final video, but it's just so cool to see how they kind of start off looking like those alligator creatures, and then they just become more and more ladybug-like in the pupa, and then magically they come out as something totally different. So we as humans have had a pretty long history with ladybugs. In many cultures, they're seen as good luck charms. In fact, the Turkish name for ladybug translates as good luck bug. In Russia, they're God's little cow. In French, they're cow of God, vache à Dieu. And even in England at one time, they were called lady cows. So they're either named for the Virgin Mary or cows, it seems, are the 2 big ones. There's also a popular children's nursery rhyme. Ladybird, ladybird, fly away home. Your house is on fire and your children are gone. All except one, and that's little Anne, for she has crept under the warming pan. Nursery rhymes are so cheerful. And here I will introduce you to the state insect for Delaware, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Ohio, and Tennessee. Coccinella septempunctata. If you go back and look at all of those 7-spot, 15-spot, 20-spot, the Latin names are, it's like if you want to learn how to count in Latin, go look at all those names, because here's septempunctata, but they'll have like, I don't know, 14 is like, I don't remember, but it's a pretty cool way to learn your Latin numbers. So this is the 7-spot ladybug, state insect for all those states, but it's not even native to those states that have adopted it as their state insect. This is a European species that was also brought over to the US and then adored by those states. So of all the states with ladybugs as their state insect, only New York State has a native ladybug, the Coccinella nobemnotata, or the 9-spotted lady beetle. And we'll wrap up, so to speak, our ladybug stories with a look at maybe the most mind-boggling adaptation of ladybugs, and this is flight. I think most of us probably know that ladybugs can fly. Most beetles can fly, usually not very well. And in order to fly, those outer 4 wings have to get out of the way so that the hind wings underneath can come out. They're not the most adept flyers. They're not very fast, considering a ladybird's top speed is about 15 miles an hour compared with 70 miles an hour for some dragonflies. But when you consider that the wings of a lady beetle are 4 times as long as the insect itself, and that these wings unfold in a fraction of a second, and they're so delicate, this is a remarkable feat. So to extend their wings for flight, they rely on the wings being elastic, and then this kind of hydraulic pressure to push the wings out. And again, that happens very quickly. But after flight, they have to tuck that wing back into the tiny space under the shell. And that takes a couple seconds to do the folding. And it almost looks as if the shield is swallowing up those wings, but we really can't see what's happening because it's under the shield, or at least we couldn't. So to study this phenomenon, according to the How Stuff Works website, researchers at the University of Tokyo were able to replace part of the outer wing of a ladybug with an artificial transparent version using resin similar to those used for artificial fingernails. And then with high-speed cameras, they examined the process. And the key had to do with the curvature on the wings, similar to how a metal carpenter's tape can come out very strong and rigid and then also easily be put back into the roll. And so what we see is a folding pattern that would put even like a master origami artist to shame. And they do this without using hands or fingers. So now we'll watch a short but incredible National Geographic video that looks at this process. And this one does have sound, I hope, I think. So here's an image of what a folded wing looks like on the right next to that extended wing. It just shows how intricately folded that becomes under the forewing. And again, they do that without hands. So those are the stories that I have to tell about ladybugs. They're familiar, they're cute, they don't strike fear in us the way many insects do. And I imagine, as I said at the beginning, a lot of it has to do with that kind of outer beetle sheath or the shell that kind of nicely hides all those squishy, icky insect parts that might otherwise make us squirm. So picking up a ladybug is like picking up a button or an M&M. A predator might look at those bright colors as a warning, but a child probably sees those bright colors as something magical. And so we'll end with another delightful short video that kind of sums its feeling up. And thank you for joining us. We'll stick around for a bit after the video. So.
Like, comment, and subscribe.
And there we have it.